Digging for you.
Too hot.
So hot.
How's your day going, small dog? What is that?
In your mouth.
Yeah. What is that? What a peculiar addition.
What is that?
Oh.
Come out.
It looks like a little chicken.
Oh, little chicken. Oh, little roast chicken. What? You got a little tissue on you.
This is the book, and also this is a new project. This is the Henleaze Heritage Trails, and the catalyst to this creation of this was the demolition of 2 lime kilns in Henleaze, which was the last historical archaeological feature in Henleaze, which was somewhat sad. I just don't like history disappearing overnight.
No, absolutely. And what about the sort of wider situation in Henleaze?
Right, well, Henleaze is a relatively new area in Bristol compared to Clifton and Hotwells and Filton and other areas. And it started off as a joke writing about Henleaze because people said there's no local history there, you'll never find anything. So I started writing articles for a local newsletter, and over the years it built up, and a friend said, why don't you write a book? And I said, oh no, that won't be possible. And then when I started researching, lots of people came forward and I did interviews with them, and they had so many strong memories, you know, of when there were big houses in the area, and there were people who'd worked as servants in these houses and their memories. And because 150 years ago, Henleaze was countryside, and there was only about half a dozen big houses there, gentlemen's residences as they were called in those days. So it's changed considerably over the years. It's a very popular suburb these days because it's got 2 extremely good primary schools there.
So it kind of came out of your own interest in like where you were living at the time.
Yes, that's right. Because I thought, well, this is something I know about, so I'll write about it because I know about it. I think that's why a lot of people do write, because they know their subject. And it comes through, doesn't it, when they start writing.
So what's the most recent one that you've put out?
This is the most recent one. It's taken about 4 or 5 years to produce because it's necessary to find the volume. Yes, all very good. Right then. Sorry about that. So, you can edit here. Because you have to find the nucleus of pictures to make the book, and then you have to start collecting more pictures because there's about 90 to 100 pictures in the book, and when you've got those, what I like to do is to lay them out so as though it's a walking picture of the town.
So you could follow this route with the book
with the book, and then try and find the history relating to that particular picture.
Where did you get the photos from? Like from these archives here? Or?
No. The postcards are dealt with by dealers, and so you have to go to postcard fairs all over the country, and you may have to go through 2,000-3,000 cards to find one.
Yeah.
So it's just a question of being patient and doing what you can.
Yep. I've been painting pretty much all my life, but progressively more sort of single-mindedly in the last 8 years. Sort of natural history and things with a Bristol connection. I suppose the first big Bristol book I did was one on the Downs. That was pretty much a sort of guidebook. And it was only when I started doing it that I realised the daunting prospect of having to make things look exactly like they are. In parallel with that, I've been illustrating poems for friends. And about 2 months ago, it occurred to me that I'd got the makings of a collection. So, and it came off the press and was officially published a week ago. And so this is exciting times, really, because, as I say, this is my first book that's entirely my project, and so I've had a huge emotional investment in getting it right.
Can I ask just about the history of the bookshop and like what?
Yeah, I started in 2004. The name of the company is actually Naked Guides Limited. The first two books I did were the Naked Guide to Bristol, Naked Guide to Bath. Then I rebranded it as Tangent Books. I've done lots of things which weren't Naked Guides. About 6 years ago, when I moved back to Bristol, I've been working from Paintworks on the Bath Road ever since. Initially, I had a very clear brief of publishing radical books, usually with an art or a musical perspective. And then as the company's developed, I've broadened it out a bit more, still with a radical edge, but also taking on more social history, I suppose. Yeah, so that's Tangent.
And what have you got like upcoming stuff?
Next year, I'm hoping to do a major book will be, I hope, a production with Chris Chalkley from the People's Republic of Stokes Croft, which will be a sort of a piece about the art and the philosophy of what drives the People's Republic of Stokes Croft. Possibly a Naked Guide to Manchester, that's on the cards. Maybe some fiction, and possibly an encyclopedia of women's comedy. That's the other one which I'm looking at doing. And there'll be a few other bits and bobs. I'm doing something about a radical or an anarchist architect movement from the 70s called Street Farm as well, which is fascinating. So I'm sort of continuing that art and radical edge. Yeah.
Bristol Radical History Group. Well, it kind of started in 2005. It comes out of a sports club called the Eastern Cowboys. Well, we read a book called The Many-Headed Hydra, History of the Revolutionary Atlantic, which was a pioneering work because it looked at the Atlantic in the 17th and 18th centuries in particular, but from the perspective rather of nation states, but more from looking at the perspective of people and commodities, so labour and commodities, so how they moved. So commodities being goods, but also people, slaves, and indentured labourers, and how those people moved across the Atlantic, and everywhere they went, how they resisted their proletarianisation, i.e. their removal from subsistence, their need to work, whether as forced labourers of all different kinds or eventually as wage labourers, and how they resisted that. And that's why it's called the Many-Headed Hydra, because everywhere where the British Empire or other empires tried to exploit labour, exploit plantations, they found they got revolts. And those revolts are very interesting in the 18th century because they involve, for example, if you look at New York in 1741, you find there was a revolt against the British Empire which involved black West African slaves, Irish indentured labourers, Spanish prisoners of war, and mutinous British soldiers. So there's this kind of idea that this movements of people and mixings of people that went on. There's a very interesting history of revolt, and it's really a revolt against early stages of mercantile capitalism. And Bristol features in the book, and so we read it. It's talking about Bristol, and there's exposed some really interesting hidden histories of Bristol. So we were talking about it all the time, and eventually the sports club, people at the sports club just got fed up with it and said, you need to go and set up a history group. So we did. We set up Bristol Radical History Group, and we did some events in 2006 called Bristol Radical History Week. And they characterised the way the group was going to be for the next few years. We discovered 4 things. One, we wanted to expose hidden histories that have been ignored, or and to ask the question why they've been ignored. We like to criticise established histories as a result, often they go hand in hand. We also critique radical histories, so we turn the critical eye on stuff that's already been written about, which has been very interesting. And lastly, we try to bring all of this together and relate it to contemporary struggles against capitalism. And that includes many other things: gender, race, sexuality, all sorts of things. So, but
the point of the group really is to try and make it interesting. The subsidiary thing is to try and get people in the group to learn how to research. We encourage, it's not rocket science, it's not the province of the academy, anybody can learn how to do this. While we're in the Bristol Record Office, one of the things is bringing people down here and saying, hey, you know what? This is how you get a real document out from 1811, and oh my God, it's the real thing, So we encourage people to do research, and then we encourage them to write. And they produce pamphlets. I picked one out here. So people. The idea is to get people to research and write and produce something, and then speak about it.
Hey, do any of you guys have a bike up? Yes.
I'm working on it. Allez, allez, allez. Vendredi.